Hi there, I'm the _twig and I like analysing game rules. I'm sure that you've all heard people saying that the new Ranger is bad. This is absolute rubbish. The Ranger is without a doubt a good class, but a lot of its power is hidden outside of its core class features. Their spells, weapons and multiclassing options have seen a massive improvement, and they synergise far better with the core features than you might think. I want to show off a build as a defense of the Ranger, so you can see what they actually look like. This build is not going to be highly optimised, and it's not going to use any tricks or cheese. You can make a far stronger Ranger than this really easily. For example, there's a really powerful 6th level Ranger feature which I'm not going to use at all, which gives your Ranger an extra 3d4 damage on every single hit if you are signed up to the _twigs Patreon. It also lets you chat on my private Discord, and you get to see all of my videos early. I posted a couple of drafts of this particular build that I'm going to be presenting on my Discord as well, so you could have been seeing it a full week ago. You also get to meet SK, who has the most well-defined chin you've ever seen. That thing could break icebergs. SK being born too late is the reason that Jack Dawson died. You hear that, SK? It's your fault. Actually, it might be your parents' fault. Or grandparent? Somebody in your family is at fault here. Anyways, as I said, this is a fairly straightforward Ranger build with no tricks or cheese. Rule sets wise, I'm doing 2024 only, no backwards compatibility, but I am allowing myself to use a custom background. This is Brunwick. Brunwick is a dwarf, and that gives him 120 feet of dark vision and the ability to give himself tremor sense proficiency times per day, both of which will help him explore and track. He also gets poison resistance and advantage on saving throws against the poison condition, and plus 1 HP per level, which makes it a lot easier for me to justify dropping to 14 con on a frontliner rather than the much safer 16 that I would normally go for. I wanted to make this a 2-weapon fighting build for 3 main reasons. First, it's a classic rangery thing. Second, it probably has the best obvious synergies with other Ranger features. And third, I just really like the 2024 2-weapon fighting rules. They're great. That means that I'm putting 17 in Brunwick's dex, and as I said, 14 in his con. This lets me put his wisdom up to 16, which will help in a few places later on, and 10 in charisma, which probably gives away his subclass already. Strength and intelligence are staying at 8. All characters now get a free feat from their background, and on Brunwick I'm picking up Alert, which gives him proficiency in initiative and the option to swap his initiative score with an ally at the start of combat. We're using that for some teamwork though. Brunwick doesn't actually have anything that means that he really wants to go first. In fact, he'd probably rather go after the cleric casts Bless or the wizard casts Web. So what we're going to do is we're going to boost up our initiative as high as possible and then swap down, letting the cleric or the wizard go first. As for our first level features, we get a few different things. First up, 2 weapon masteries. These are new special techniques that we can do with our weapons, essentially for free. And we're going to be learning the mastery for the short sword, which is called Vex, and gives us advantage on our next attack if we hit with the short sword, and the mastery for the scimitar, which is called Nick. That lets us do 2 weapon fighting without having to spend an extra bonus action. There's a lot more to it than just that, but I'm not going deep on 2-weapon fighting here. That's getting an entire video all on its own. Next, we get spellcasting right from first level now, and it's greatly improved as well. Ranger can now cast rituals, and there's a whole bunch of really good ones, including Alarm, Detect Magic, Speak with Animals, and Water Breathing. They also let you swap out one of their spells every single day. So if you know that tomorrow you're going to be raiding the vampire's lair, you can just grab Daylight. This gives them a lot more flexibility than before. For Brunwick's spells though, we'll be picking up Cure Wounds, which has received a sizable buff, now healing 2d8 plus whiz damage for an average of 12, as well as Speak with Animals, which is one of those new rituals and an incredibly useful utility spell. If we decide that we need Detect Magic or Disguise Self instead, we can swap it out on a long rest. Finally, we get Hunter's Mark prepared for free and can cast it twice per day, also for free. Because we're not using a spell slot on that, we could even spend our action on casting another spell like Cure Wounds. Hunter's Mark is way better than it used to be. Because Nick means that 2-weapon fighting doesn't use a bonus action, there's no bonus action clog with Hunter's Mark, so it effectively gets 1 extra attack relative to the 2014 Ranger every single time we move it. That's enough to make it genuinely worth casting, and on this build, we'll be using it as our main concentration spell right the way to level 20. As I said, this is a bog standard ranger build. You can do way better. Now then, let's quickly explain the damage here. I think that it's way too early to be making baselines for 2024 yet, so I'm going to be comparing my damage against a 2014 Warlock using Eldritch Blast and Hex, a 2014 Crossbow Expert Sharpshooter Fighter, and that same fighter with permanent advantage. If the damage calculation here is red, it's worse than Warlock, which is bad. If it's orange, it's between the Warlock and the Fighter, which is fine, okay. If it's yellow, it's better than the Fighter, which is pretty good. If it's green, it's better than the Fighter with advantage, which is great. And if it's white, then it beats the advantage fighter by more than 20%, which is absolutely amazing damage. The left calculation is without advantage, and the right calculation is with advantage. By the way, all of the damage calculations and this final build will be in the description of the video. Let's now level up to 2, where we get Deft Explorer, a fighting style, and another spell. Deft Explorer gives us an expertise, which we'll put in perception, so Brunwick is better at tracking and hunting and stuff, and another language. Then for our fighting style, we'll pick up 2 weapon fighting, because that's what we're doing, and lets us add our dexterity to our scimitar attacks. Finally, for our extra spell, we'll grab Detect Magic, another ritual, which will help loosen up the preps for the cleric and the wizard. Now at 3rd level, we get our subclass, and I'm picking the Fey Wanderer. I just really like the subclass, and it synergizes well with our 2 weapon fighting Hunter's Mark build. We get Dreadful Strikes, which gives us an extra 1d4 the first time Brunwick hits a target each turn, and whilst I'm not making use of it here, if you have a weapon with the Cleave Weapon Mastery, or you just attack 2 different enemies, you can actually use Dreadful Strikes on both of them. We then get Otherworldly Glamour, which gives us a proficiency, we'll put it in Persuasion, and lets us add our Wisdom modifier to Charisma checks, meaning that our Persuasion and Deception are actually quite good. Finally, we get some free spells. Right now we get Charmed Person, which isn't great, but there's better ones later on. Also at 3rd level we get another spell of our choice, and I'll be grabbing Ensnaring Strike. If we shoot a flyer and land an Ensnaring Strike on it, it will immediately fall to the ground. For us, that's the main use of this spell. It's also been buffed like the Smite spells, so now you only use it when you hit, meaning that it's never wasted. At 4th level, we pick up our first feat, Defensive Duelist. This is a really cool feat which says that whenever Brunwick is hit by a melee attack whilst holding a finesse weapon, we can use a reaction to add our proficiency bonus to his AC until the start of his next turn. That is a really good defensive reaction. It's a bit like a mini shield spell, but it doesn't cost any spell slots. It also gives us +1 dex, bringing us up to 18. Some of you might have wanted to get Dual Wielder here, but I don't think it's worth spending a feat on a bonus action attack when we're going to be using Hunter's Mark so frequently. Feats are very limited, and we want to preserve them as much as possible. I have an alternative coming up in a couple of levels anyway. We also get another spell, and I'm just going to grab Detect Poison and Disease. It's another decent ritual, which helps us spot ambushes by spiders or whatever. Okay, 5th level gives Brunwick extra attack. That means another hit from Hunter's Mark, and we can even chain 2 Vexes together, meaning that the damage increase is probably larger than you might expect. We also get 2nd level spells, and Fey Wanderer automatically gives us Misty Step. That's a great spell. We're also going to pick up Spike Growth, which has a number of good uses, and we'll swap out Detect Poison and Disease for Magic Weapon, which is now a bonus action and doesn't use concentration. If we have nothing else to do with our bonus action, or we have a chance to pre-buff, Magic Weapon is a good option. 6th level is the one curveball in this build, but I think it makes a lot of sense. We're going to be multiclassing Monk. With 18 Dex and 16 Wiz, Unarmored Defense is actually a +1 AC. We also get Martial Arts, which gives Brunwick a bonus action unarmed strike, which could be either a punch, a grapple, or a shove, and lets us change our weapons to a hand axe and a dagger, both of which can be thrown, meaning that we also have a range option. If the party has a lot of advantage generation already, we could alternatively get a club, which has the slow mastery, giving the target it hits -10 speed. This is no longer just a 1 to 20 ranger, but there's enough synergy there that I don't think it's out of the window for someone to think that it's a good idea. As such, I think it's reasonable for me to pick up here. Back in Ranger now, at 7th level we get Roving. This gives Brunwick +10 speed, as well as a climb speed and a swim speed. Very nice for getting around. We also get another spell, and I'm going to pick up Locate Object. It's a personal favourite of mine. I actually made an entire video about it, which I believe is completely intact in the 2024 rules. Excellent little utility spell for learning about your environment and locating your enemies. At 8th level we get our next subclass feature, Beguiling Twist. We have advantage on saves against the Charmed and Frightened conditions, and whenever anyone, including us, succeeds on one of these 2 saves, we can attempt to charm or frighten an enemy of our choice instead. We don't have a ton of synergy for that on this build, but maybe the cleric will use Turn Undead or something. Now at 9th level we pick up another feat, and I'm going to grab Mage Slayer. First up, whenever Brunwick deals damage to a caster, they have disadvantage on their concentration save. He has 4 attacks, so that's going to stack up quickly. If he hits all 4 attacks, then they actually need a +8 in their saving throw to even have 50% chance of keeping concentration. On top of that, once per day when we fail an intelligence, wisdom or charisma save, we can just decide to succeed instead. It's essentially just legendary resistance, and it's incredibly useful. Brunwick also gets 2 new spells, and I'll pick up Pass Without Trace, which is unchanged from 2014, but is much less broken now that surprise rules have changed, and also Silence. We have a bonus action Unarmed Strike, so if we end up going before that caster, we can run up to them, grapple them as a bonus action, and then trap them in a silence spell, preventing them from casting in the first place. Leveling up to 10, we get another expertise, which I'll put in Stealth, and 3rd level spells. Fey Wanderer gives us Summon Fey for free, which isn't useful yet, but will be very soon. And I'm also going to be swapping out Detect Magic for Dispel Magic. Between this, Mage Slayer, and our Silence Grapple, Brunwick is an absolute nightmare for casters. I also just want to quickly remind you all about the ability to swap out your spells. If we know that we're having a boat session, we can just quickly swap out something like Locate Object to grab Water Breathing or Water Walk. It's super useful and gives Brunwick a ton of versatility. Okay, 11th level. Brunwick gets Tireless, which gives him 1d8 plus Wiz temp HP, Wiz times per day. That will be around 13.5 temps, and he also recovers from exhaustion after a short rest rather than a long rest. We also get 1 more spell, which will be Conjure Barrage. 60-foot cone with no friendly fire is a pretty good AoE, and it does 5d8 force damage, which is almost as good as Fireball. Not bad at all if there's a bunch of smaller enemies. This is the only level where we're doing worse than the 2014 fighter, by the way, and that's just because our level 11 damage bump was delayed by the monk dip. There are many ways that we could boost this back up. At 12th level, our damage immediately bounces back thanks to Fey Reinforcements. This gives us 1 free casting of Summon Fey per day, and every time we cast it, we can choose to reduce the duration to 1 minute instead of 1 hour. But if we do this, then we don't have to concentrate on it. That means that we can have Summon Fey and Hunter's Mark up at the same time, which is really nice. Most of the time we either want the Mirthful form to try and trigger Beguiling Twist. Quick tip, Brunwick can attempt to charm himself, and if he succeeds with his advantage then it automatically triggers Beguiling Twist. Or we could use Trixie form to create darkness to stand in, potentially giving us advantage. 13th level now, and Brunwick gets another feat. We want a dexterity boosting feat to put ourselves up to 20, but there's a few good options, so I'm going to let you choose. Skulker gives us 10 feet of blindside, so if our party likes using things like heavy obscurement, it's a very powerful option. Mounted Combatant gives us advantage against anyone smaller than the mount we buy, so if it's a horse-friendly campaign, also very good. And finally, Grappler lets us both punch and grapple with our bonus action Unarmed Strike, and unrestricts our movement while grappling. I think that Grappler is my favourite here, but take your pick, whichever works best for your particular campaign. We also get another spell, and I'll grab Plank Growth, which restricts movement, meaning that we can just take pot shots with the longbow while enemies try and approach us. Now at 14th level we get Relentless Hunter. This says that damage can't break concentration on Hunter's Mark. That protects our frontline abilities a bit more. We also get 4th level spells, and Fey Wanderer gives Brunwick Dimension Door for free. That's a pretty decent spell. Unfortunately the rest of the 4th level spells aren't that great on a Hunter's Mark build. Something like Conjure Woodland Beings is fantastic, but I specifically want this build to use Hunter's Mark, just to prove that it is actually okay. Most of the time we'll end up spending our 4th level slot on Summon Fey, which gets 2 more attacks, more HP, and better AC and damage. By the way, for anyone who thinks that Hunter's Mark shouldn't be concentration, I hard disagree. If that was the case, this build would have absolutely bonkers damage instead of just being pretty good all the way through. Hunter's Mark would just be so abusable without concentration on it. I'm sure that many of you have seen that Valor board with Conjure Minor Elementals and like 7 or 8 attacks. Imagine if it had Hunter's Mark as well. 15th level. Nature's Veil lets Brunwick turn invisible for basically 2 turns. It's pretty good, and we'll also grab Revivify just in case it's necessary. After that, at 16th level, Misty Wanderer says that we can Misty Step for free Wiz times per day, and whenever we cast it, we can take an ally with us. It's like a mini, cheaper dimension door. 17th level now, and we'll just grab an ability score improvement, boosting our DC, AC, and our summon phase attack rolls. Brunwick also gets 2 more spells, and he'll pick up Freedom of Movement, which is just a nice spell to have. It helps us get out of difficult situations, as well as Grasping Vine, which can pull a flyer out of the air or trap an enemy in an ally's AoE spell. Next level, we can also upcast it to target 2 enemies. It's a much better spell than it was in 2014. 18th level, we get Precise Hunter. That gives us permanent advantage against our Hunter's Mark target. Brunwick also gets his 5th level slots, and Fey Wanderer gives him Mislead for free, which is decently useful. At 19, Brunwick gets Feral Senses, which gives him 30 feet of blindside. If you picked Skulker earlier, it's kind of redundant now, but it did get 6 levels of value, which is pretty good. I'm also picking up Greater Restoration, again just because it's nice to have. Then, finally, at 20th level, we get the Boon of Dimensional Travel, which lets us teleport 30 feet every time we take an attack or magic action. So, let's just go over this build again. It's a fairly low optimization ranger, with the only real thing being that 1 level monk dip. They do damage comparable to a 2014 crossbow expert fighter, and at some levels, substantially more. Brunwick also has a bunch of cool rangery utility spells and features, like Ritual Cast Speak with Animals, Pass Without Trace, and Dwarf's Stone Cunning. He also has the ability to grab spells like Water Breathing or Disguise Self with a day's preparation, and he's an absolute nightmare for casters, breaking their concentration, trapping them in silence, and dispelling. He'd be incredibly easy to improve by taking spells like Conjure Woodland Beings and doing some weird juggling techniques, or maybe taking a few different multiclasses. New Ranger isn't bad. They haven't lost any of their identity. Their options have opened up substantially. New Ranger good. If you want more stuff like this, stick around. I've got other build videos done into some really weird spells and mechanics, and a few videos about the game from a more stand-back viewpoint. If you like those too, why not subscribe? I've got more stuff about D&D 2024 coming out soon. I'd also really appreciate it if you would share this around. That's the best way to help me out, and also to try and correct this idea that the Ranger is bad. Bye!